Sheila, tell me about it's the Dunamead Literary Festival, and it's an inaugural festival, I believe. Tell us about that.
Well, the idea came about because last year the library was threatened with closure. The lease is up in Dublin County Council, I think, or corporation, whatever, was talking about not renewing the lease, and a lot of people got really upset about it. And I had used the library a number of times, and people got in touch with me, and I was saying, this is terrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, in the end, very fortunately, with some pressure, the lease was renewed, so the library is safe, and the library is actually in the shopping centre. So we realised that there was a real strength of feeling about it. You know, I mean, the library was well used. It wasn't a case of them wanting to close it down because it wasn't used. It was just a thing about the lease. And a few people got talking about, you know, will we harness that? You know, that love of books and that love of reading. That's very clearly there.
Can you have a cup of tea in the library?
You can have a cup of tea outside because there's a coffee shop just outside.
Great.
Which is excellent.
That's great.
Yeah. So, lovely coffee shop as well.
Yeah.
And anyway, we were chatting about this, and Eoin O'Riordan, who's one of the senators out there, said, would we be able to have a festival? And then he said to me, what do you think? And I said, what would we have to do? And I was saying all the things that we'd have to do. And he said, do you think we could do it? And I said, well, it depends. And then he had a meeting with the shopping centre owner, and the shopping centre owner said, that sounds like a great idea. You know, we've had events in the shopping centre before.
Yes.
And we have space. Why not? And the whole idea, like when I was thinking about it, I said, you know, it's not a literary festival where people want to be clever and show off. It's people wanting to love books and enjoy reading. So one of the panels is a panel on crime fiction. We have a panel on women's writing, which is obviously very, very popular. We have a panel on movie adaptations, you know. And then we've lots of workshops
and this is for this is on the 26th of September, is it?
26th to the 28th.
To the 28th.
Yeah.
And it's aimed at young readers, all ages.
It's all ages, because we have Shane Hegarty talking to the primary school readers, and then we have every age group going up with something, whether it's a workshop or a conversation.
So you've workshops for
we've got everything.
This is amazing.
If there are people who want to get inspired about writing, some of them are booked out at this point, but we have a workshop for the kind of transition year, that age group.
Right.
And so
this has gone from a library that was going to be closed down to a literary festival with yourself.
Yes.
Roddy Doyle is going to be attending.
Yes.
Claudia Carroll.
Yeah.
And some of the really, really popular authors.
We've
providing
Deirdre Purcell, Ciara Geraghty. We've got loads of people coming. I'm really pleased with the lineup that we have.
It's funny that you mentioned the library, because I did read somewhere that your initial ambition was to work in a library.
Yes, it was.
Because you always loved books, didn't you?
Because I thought that would be my dream job, that I would have to read books in the library and recommend them to the people that came in. So I thought I was a shoe-in for the library, but I didn't.
And the peace in the library, surrounded by all these books.
Yes, although I mean libraries are much more community hubs now, and there's a lot more going on. But at the same time, they're essentially, you know, places with loads of books, and so that to me was, you know, that was a dream job.
This is the other side, and so really what we do here is we talk to somebody like yourself who's so established. When we talk about established, we're talking about, I think you've sold over 10 million books. I know you're a very modest person, you probably don't like hearing it, but it's a fact. We have to deal with facts. Over 10 million books. You've written 24 books. Yeah. Your latest book is already a massive seller, Her Husband's Mistake.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about that in a minute as well. Huge achievements. But what we do is we talk about your life up to the point that you really became established. Now, as I was saying to you earlier, you were a force to reckon with in the banking world, never mind the literary world. But I think that you would place the point of real success in terms of your literary success with your fourth book, which was Suddenly Single.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about your life up to then, if that's okay.
That's fine.
And we're going to start with, at the very beginning, with Joe and Patty, your parents. You were brought up in Green Hills in Dublin. Tell us first of all about Joe and Patty.
Well, actually, they were a solid couple. You know, they they did a lot of things together, and they worked together because my dad had a shop in the Ivy Market. It was the grocery shop in the market. My grandmother had a fruit and vegetable stall there, and there were a couple of butcher shops there, but there wasn't a grocery shop. So my dad thought, we need a grocery shop there, and he opened the shop. And you know, for us, all our family life revolved around the fact that we had a shop, and everything we did had the shop as a background. And my mum worked part-time in the shop with him. So they were together a lot. And so, you know, my kind of, I suppose our upbringing and our kind of concept of family life was of a husband and wife who did things together, you know, and who did things, not just family things together, but did working things together.
And hard work.
And hard work, yes. I mean, it was hard work because obviously, you know, you're talking about a shop like that, which would be, you kind of say it's a corner shop, that kind of thing. It is really, really hard work. And every sale matters and everything matters.
And every sale is difficult.
Yes. So I mean, that were my parents. They were hard-working people, and I suppose they pretty much brought us up saying that life doesn't owe you anything. You know, you have to get out there and do it yourself, and if you want something, you have to do it yourself, and nobody's going to give it to you, because that's the way they were brought up.
You said somewhere that if you had told your father, Dad, I want to be an astronaut, he would have said, okay, work hard.
Yeah, he did. You know, I mean, there were 3 daughters, and
you were the eldest.
I'm the eldest. And I remember once a neighbour saying to him, "Oh, you must so regret that you don't have any sons." And he said, "Why would I regret that? I have 3 great girls." And he brought us up believing that, you know, we could do whatever we wanted to do. It never occurred to me that there were things that I couldn't do, especially because I was a girl. You know,
yes. So you never believed in any limitations.
Not at all.
And you saw that from the beginning. And your parents worked equally together and were a great team by the sounds of things. We're going to talk about your dad in a minute and his very sad passing at a very young age. But I want to know what things were like for you in school, because I have a theory that, you know, when kids are doing the CAO and filling in the forms and they're saying, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I don't know, what am I good at? Where will I get work? A lot of parents will put pressure on the kids. Where are the jobs? Go for something where you'll get a job. But I think that from a very early age, you actually do have an inkling about what you're good at. And when you do something that you're good at, you tend to be able to make a living out of it. And you were always reading, and you were always interested in books. And did that happen from your parents' influence, or was it in school?
I think it would have been more my parents' influence initially, because although we didn't, you know, I didn't grow up in a house where the walls were lined with books, my parents both believed that books were very important and that reading was very important. Even though my mother would, you know, nudge me out of a book and say, would you please tidy your room? Would you stop reading and do something else? At the same time...
And we're all dying for our kids to read now.
At the same time, go outside in God's holy air and stop sitting in here with your nose in a book. But having said that, then I would go outside with the book. You know, so okay, compromise. That's fair enough. But they believed that reading was really important. So it was just part of our lives. And you know, at a young age.
Were you reading before you went to school?
I was, yes. And then pretty much, I can't recall at what age, but I know we were all enrolled in the library, and quite young. We were enrolled in the library. It used to be a mile of a walk to the library and a mile back, and my mum would take us to the library.
So you did get plenty of God's fresh air.
So I did, absolutely, yes. I knew a shortcut. So we could go a shortcut. So that was always part of my life, and I loved books, and I just loved the different lives that I read about in books, and you know, it wasn't that. Even the Enid Blyton books, where all the children were really privileged and they had cooks and scullery maids. I always kept saying to my mum, "What's a scullery?"
I wanted ginger pop.
That was the thing. And the
Mallory Towers and the tuck box and all that stuff.
Sandwiches and so not really
We'd hate it now, but it sounded exotic at the time, didn't it?
It sounded terribly exotic. And there were things that would go on in those books where I hadn't a clue what was happening. But at the same time, I got really engaged with all the characters and all their lives, and they mattered to me. So you know, from reading, I suppose part of it also was that I wanted to know more about them, more than that was in the books. You know, and spoke about this before, but one day, you know, I said to her, well, what happens next? And she said, well, what do you think happens next? And I started
How interesting.
telling her.
So you continued the story.
So I just continued. So that's what I used to do when I was, you know, small, and that's probably from about 7 or 8. You know,
My mother used to make up stories and tell us stories, and she created this character called Dickie. And to this day, we still talk about Dickie.
Yeah.
And he was a bad person, and I think it was her version of the bogeyman.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful way of opening up your mind and your imagination and making you think and think creatively.
Well,
and
I think there's 2 things about that. It puts you into somebody else's shoes as well,
Yeah.
which I think is really important. And I think maybe some of us have lost that ability. You know, people generally had to stand in somebody else's shoes and think the way they're thinking. And so, you know, you're reading a book and you're reading about a character who is doing things that in a million years you would not do.
Yes.
Or making choices that you wouldn't make.
Yes.
And it's really, really interesting. You're going, oh my God, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
Yes,
This is going to be terrible.
Yeah.
And seeing how those things work out. So I was always really intrigued.
And you used to write stories for your sisters, I think. Was this a sort of a way to make them do tasks for you?
Yes, I had this kind of thing going on because we were all reading the school stories. I mean, that was the thing. We all wanted to go to boarding school, so
Yes, yes.
So I wrote this series of stories about this girl at boarding school.
Did you?
Yes.
Do you have them still?
No.
Oh.
Just as well, I'm sure, just as well. But I would write a chapter which would be about 2 pages or something, you know, and I would say, well, I'll write another chapter if you do the hoovering, but I can't do it because I'm writing.
These would be worth a fortune now.
I doubt that very much. People will be looking at them and saying, how did she ever get over those, you know?
Because this thing about school, boarding school, look at Hogwarts, look at, the way
but
kids
you see,
are
the thing is,
so...
it's children, because the stories just focus on the children.
Yes,
and focus on the children probably in, you know, not rebelling against the adults, but, you know, having very set things that they want to do and adults being in the way. But children are in charge of their own destiny.
Yes, and the children come to the rescue.
Absolutely.
Do you remember the famous 5? And
that's why they were so popular, because the children were doing things without adults.
As a child, I read, my mother had Agatha Christie's, and she was a
Yes.
mad Agatha Christie fan. And I used to read all those books too. And we were talking about this earlier, about Agatha Christie, and you felt that she was very underrated.
Yes, well, I felt that clearly her books are plot-driven because they're a mystery, it's a murder, it's a mystery. And a lot of the minor characters are not well drawn, particularly because they don't need to be.
Yeah.
But I always thought she, particularly Miss Marple, was an absolutely brilliant, clever character. Clever character in that there was a big commentary going on about women's place in society and how people looked at women, particularly older women, and where they're kind of writing her off because, you know, she's old, she's elderly, she doesn't... They're assuming that her mental faculties aren't great.
Right.
And she just comes in and sits down and solves these murders.
And she knows exactly what's going on.
She knows exactly what's going on. And I think that's a really, you know, that we have... People don't focus in enough on that part of Agatha Christie's writing where she is so astute. And the same with Poirot as an immigrant into England, because he was an émigré from Belgium.
Sure.
And the attitudes people had towards that. And I think it's really, really interesting to read.
And it's funny, and you said he was Belgian, because a lot of people would have said he was French. You really are an Agatha Christie fan. So, no doubt
I think
about that.
at some point in every book he says he's Belgian to whoever thinks he's French.
He says it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the initial influence from your parents and then your own love of reading took over. Was there an inspiring teacher in school?
I wouldn't say so much that the teachers were particularly inspiring, but I always... That sounds terrible. That sounds that I didn't feel that they were.
Well, sometimes your school, you know, you're always told your school days are the best days of your life.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an awful thing to hear, because there are school kids that think, if this is as good as it's going to get, I really don't want to continue. You know, sometimes it isn't.
Yeah, I didn't feel that, but
I
I never thought they were the best days of my
your
life.
Yes,
It wasn't so much. I think I did have inspiring teachers, but I was just focusing in on the English side. Actually, one of my most inspiring teachers was our Latin teacher, who was a very determined kind of woman as well, and I really liked her. You know, and she was another one of, you know, oh girls, you know, buck up. You know, she was that kind of woman, but she was very good. But in terms of English, I think one of the things that I felt about English in school at the time that I was in school, so it's quite a long time ago now, was that it was too much about analysing other people's work and not giving you a chance to be creative yourself.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you. Yeah.
So,
maybe
that
the
has
same
changed.
now.
Is
No,
it
I
really?
don't think so.
Yeah, I think that's poor.
My daughter's just done the Leaving Cert, and and she is interested in writing, and she's creative, and her own essays are very interesting, and they can be quite moving. And I would like to have seen more of that, more encouragement of that in the course. But anyway, it is also very important, I suppose, to study the works that are out there.
Well, of course it is, and you know, you do need to be able to read widely, which
Yes.
I think is what school should do for you, and not kind of. Again, you get a bit corralled into your readings.
You have to read,
you know,
this is the book list, and you must read
texts.
Treasure Island, and you must read 1984 and of Mice and Men and all of that.
One of the things that I found about that was there were far too many elderly men on the curriculum. I mean, maybe that has changed too, but you know, there's kind of Steinbeck and Hemingway, and you're kind of going, these guys are all writing.
And they've been there forever.
Yeah.
They're unmovable. You're absolutely right. And I see if Mice and Men is still in the charts at the moment. That's because it's a Leaving Cert book. But in terms of people that you admire, I also read somewhere that you said that you loved Maeve Binchy. Now, I never met Maeve Binchy, but growing up, we would see her from time to time on the Late Late Show, and I always felt that she just exuded such warmth and wit and decency, and I would love to have known her. Did you have much contact with her?
Yeah, I mean, I met her a number of times, and we spoke at various events, and we, you know, so I knew. I wouldn't say that I was a close friend of her, but she was actually so wonderful to all of the Irish writers. She really was, and she was so encouraging and so kind. And, you know, that warmth that you're talking about was real.
Yes,
you know, sometimes you have this thing and people seem to be really nice and then they turn around and they're not. But Maeve was just a lovely
because
person.
the television is a medium where you can't disguise that, and you can't put it's very raw, and you can really see. You can see with the raising of an eyebrow the way somebody's actually thinking. So she was very lovable, she was very clever, very witty. She had, I believe she used to like writing on the dart to listen into conversations. Do you ever do anything like that for your own books, Sheila?
It used to be fantastic. I actually set a series of short stories on the dart.
Did you?
I did, yes. And while I was writing that, although I wasn't listening to conversations, at that point when I was writing it, I was actually doing conversations about stations on the dart, you know, things would happen, which is a little bit of an homage to Maeve, I had to say, because she did Victoria Line and Circle Line in London, which was the same kind of idea on the Underground. But now, because of mobile phones, you don't, unless somebody's having their conversation, and some of those conversations are actually quite telling, but you don't have the same chit-chat that goes on in the dart anymore, that people don't talk to each other.
No, so it's not as good a feeding ground for your novels.
It's not as fertile a stomping ground, but it is quite good for hearing people having, I mean, I heard a guy being fired over the phone, and you're just thinking, oh my God, this is not the time. But anyway, I that's there in the background for something at some point in the future. But I just thought, I wanted to get up.
Would you write that down so that you'd remember it for?
I'm terrible about writing things down. I always think it's so important I will remember it, and then I forget it for months, years, and then it pops up at some time.
So you're in school. You do your Leaving Cert, and I think you're away on a summer holiday, and your mother decides that you're going to work for the bank.
Well, I was away it was actually Easter, I think. I did one of the things that my mum did for me, which was absolutely, at the time, I just, this is not great, but afterwards has turned out to be the best thing that she ever did, was after I finished school, she sent me on a secretarial type course. It was a business studies course, but they did typing as well.
Yes.
So we did accountancy and we did typing. But clearly, you know, the typing was like on a typewriter.
Yes,
and it was like you were going to go into an office.
And so many words per minute. And
I was actually good at typing.
Yeah.
I played the piano a bit, but not well. And I was very fast at typing.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had just finished. There was only a month or so of this course left to do, and I think it was Easter, and I went away with a friend of mine. And while I was away, this job offer from the bank came, and my mother was so terrified that I would turn it down, because I had turned down a job to stay on this course because I was actually getting good at typing.
Okay.
So she was so terrified that I would turn down that she accepted it.
On your behalf? Or did she pretend to be you?
No, she didn't. She wrote in, she said, of course you couldn't do this now because people would WhatsApp you or whatever, but she wrote in and she said she is away out of the country at the moment.
Yes.
Which makes it sound like I was living this jet set life. She's out of the country at the moment, but I know she wants to take this job.
Right. In the central bank.
So that was it. Yes.
Was she a character, your mum?
She's a very determined woman.
She's a strong woman.
She's a strong
woman.
Yeah, she is a strong woman, yeah.
And so you started off in the central bank?
So I started off in the central bank. I started off actually in the personnel department, in the recruitment section for a year, and then I moved off into the banking side.
Into the banking section. And we're going to get on to you had a fantastic career in that world, in that corporate world as well. But before we do that, you suffered the loss of your dad very sadly. You were 19.
Yes.
He was 47.
Yeah, I know, it was terrible, and he had been ill for quite some time. He was ill, you know, when I was doing my leaving, and he was ill leading up to that. He'd been ill for quite some time. He had stomach cancer, and he had an operation when I was younger, and it went into remission, but then it recurred. And really, I mean, I don't know if now things might have been different, but back then it was, you know, it was just a death sentence basically, and it was really tough times for my mum. It was tough times for everybody.
Yeah.
And you know, it was difficult. I used to come in and do my homework sitting in the room with him, and it was really hard because he was a really strong person, you know, and I was very fond of him. We got on really at that sense. I was very fond of him. What I mean is that we had a very
good bond.
Strong relationship.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult, and I suppose it does, you know, it makes you realise that A, life is short, and B, nothing stays the same. You know, and because I think up to that point we had a very, very secure life.
You don't imagine actually, and especially the closeness of your parents and the very stable family that you were born into. You never imagined anything going wrong with that. You never imagined losing your parents.
Well, that's it.
And a teenager and your younger sisters as well, to lose your dad like that, who was a great influence. But your mum, it sounds very businesslike and very decisive. She made a very good decision, I think, right after his passing, in terms of the business. And what was that?
Well, basically she sold our shop.
Yes.
And then she went back and she did a back to work course herself, and she went out to work.
Yes.
And maybe that's, you know, it never occurred to her not to go back out to work.
Right.
The thing about it then as well was the family supports were much less than they are now.
I know.
And in fact, you know, she has some really harsh words to say when she went looking for some help. And this guy said, well, you know, you could always sell your TV, which was just a horrific thing to say to anybody. But she was very, very determined, you know, and she actually got a job initially in one of the wholesalers that we used to deal with, and then after that, she got a job in the passport office.
Right. Okay.
And in one of my books, I've actually given a character job in the passport office as a
nod
tribute
to your
my
mum,
mother.
to your mum. And your mum is still with you.
She is, thankfully,
and
yes.
she's going strong, and
she is.
What
she's
age is she
frailer now? She's 88 now.
She's good for her.
Yes.
She's great.
But she's still there and still telling me things I should be doing. So,
yes,
you know.
Yes. I see that she said when you got married there a few years ago, she said she's glad that you're settled.
Yes,
you said, Mum, I've been settled for 30 years. What's going on here?
I know. She loves saying your husband is doing it.
Of course, everybody will want to know, for you, what is the creative process like? You know, the likes of Jeffrey Archer, he's always so methodical. He talks about this in every interview, that he's up at 5, he works till, I think, 8 or 9 a.m, and then he takes a break, and then he's back in the afternoon, and every day is exactly the same. So do you have a process, or what way do you
I wish I could work like Jeffrey Archer, because it just sounds a great way to get your book written, you know,
You've beaten him in the bestsellers list, haven't you?
Hey.
Isn't this true?
Yes, I mean, clearly not an overall book sold ever, you know, but yes, I was ahead of him in the bestseller list,
yes.
so it was really nice. There's a couple of things about the process. I think one of the things, you know, like getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I used to get up really early when I worked in finance. We used to start work at 7, and sometimes you'd have to be in for meetings before that, and I kind of, the first year I left banking, and I was writing, I still got up really, really early.
Yes.
And then I said to myself, what are you doing? I'm a night person. I like staying up later, you know, just chill out about that. And when I mean really early, I mean, you know, 6:30 or something like that, which is not that early for a lot of people, but, you know, it's early enough. And now it's kind of 8 o'clock when I get up, and I kind of go, ooh, it's like the day is half over.
You'll write into the night then?
I try and kind of keep the writing to sort of business hours. Do you know, I try not to let it leak. It used to be that I would write very late at night. Now I try to be a little bit more disciplined. But they say there are two sorts of writers: there's planners and pantsers. Okay. And I'm a pantser. You know, I'm a person that, you know, I don't have a plan. Seat of the pants. Yeah, I don't have a kind of a checklist written down.
Right.
So I tend to write in scenes, in blocks of scenes. So I'll kind of go in. I do try and get into my desk by about 10 o'clock in the morning.
Do you start with an overall kind of idea for the whole book, and a kind of like a skeleton version of? You don't? No,
I don't. I have an idea of what the theme is.
Okay.
I have an idea of what the story is about, or what the dilemma that the main character has.
And the dilemma in your latest book, Her Husband's Mistake, the opening paragraph is very powerful. She has just come back, or it's the day after her father's funeral. She walks into the house and her husband is in bed with a neighbour. Mm-hmm.
The next door neighbour. It's even worse. Yes.
Of the female persuasion, I take it. Yes. Yeah.
And really, because this woman Roxy, she would have had that very stable, or thought a very stable relationship with her husband, and they had 2 children, and you know, nobody ever has a normal life, but what you would seem to say would be a very normal kind of life. And
she must have felt everything that I thought was real has been turned upside down now. It's all gone.
Exactly. And the kind of catalyst for him, allegedly catalyst for him, jumping in with the next door neighbour, was she had stayed with her mum for a while when her dad was unwell. Yeah. So she and the children had moved into her mum. She wanted to be with her mum and give her some support and be there for them. And her husband was supportive of that idea. Yeah. But kind of felt he was getting a bit lonely and not being looked after enough, and you know,
I hate him already.
Yeah, I know. He does sound awful. And yet, you know, hopefully in the book, not that you can see that point of view, but he you know, he does feel that he's been hard done by too.
But it's very funny because we spoke to Paul Howard recently, and you get an anti-hero, you get somebody like Ross O'Carroll Kelly, who everybody should absolutely detest. What an awful person he is, but you're rooting for him actually. And you're dying for him not to be so truthful and tell everybody all the terrible things. Shut up, Ross, and keep that quiet, and to stay away from your woman, because you really do belong to this wife of yours. So it is funny. Yes, you can. So you step into the shoes of that other person.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do. I think as a writer you are basically an actor, but not on stage. You know, you have to live the lives of the characters that you're writing with. You have to be in their head, and when whoever you're writing, you're in their head at that time. You know. And so he doesn't think that he's done anything terribly wrong in my book. He admits it's a mistake. He says it's a mistake, but he doesn't feel it's like a catastrophic mistake.
He might think it's a mistake he was caught.
Yeah. Well, that is probably in his view a greater mistake. But you know, in my view, his actual mistake is not understanding his wife enough, not realizing that she's a much stronger woman.
This is doing so well.
It's great. Yeah, I think it's been one of my, if not my best-selling book to date, which is great. Yeah.
And you're published in different languages as well.
Yes.
And I think I read somewhere that you were just, when you saw the Chinese edition of one of you just thought, I've made it now.
I know. And then I said to myself, it could be, you know, anything. It could be an instruction manual for all I know. Although they did beautiful covers for it as
really?
Well. Oh, gosh, yes.
That must be wonderful.
Oh, yeah. They were
and you've
stunning.
been with Hachette for the 20 books, I think.
Yes.
20 of the 24 books.
Yeah, I have.
So that must be a wonderful relationship there, because I'm sure with your success, plenty of other offers have come your way over the years, but you know, it is very important if you find the right team, don't you think,
Yeah,
to stick with
yes,
that?
I mean, they have a great team. I work with them both in the UK and Ireland on
Yes.
the editorial side.
Yeah,
But they
yeah.
have a great team in Ireland, and Ireland is my home country, and it matters to me that the publisher that I have in Ireland is a good publisher,
Yes.
and that I respect the people that are working there, and I do with the people in Hachette. They are fantastic people.
Yeah.
And in the UK, I've had the same editor there now for quite a number of years. I've only had 3 editors in my whole career, and my current editor, Marion, has been with me for, gosh, I think maybe 10, 15 books.
Wow.
And we work really well together. You know,
I actually saw a clip on YouTube of Marion greeting you,
oh yeah,
and you were like two long lost sisters meeting at an airport, big hugs. I mean, that's the kind of relationship you want. You know, and it's a very real one.
Well,
You could see
it's
that.
important. You
Yeah,
do have
yeah.
to trust your editor, you know,
Yes.
because they're the ones that are going to tell you things that you may not want to hear. You
Yes,
know,
yeah.
they can say, well, you know,
Yeah.
I love it, but, and you can go, oh no, what's the but? You know.
And it might be something that's very important to you, and an aspect of a character or whatever that means something to you, and you don't want it changed, and so it's a tricky
you
kind
have to
of.
kind of have a discussion about it, and like I trust Marion, and she trusts me, and we would have, if there's never usually anything so major now that it's devastating. But
Yes.
at the same time, you want to believe that the person has your best interests at heart.
Yes, yeah.
I read once that an editor is the person who makes you say what you thought you were saying.
Okay, very good.
And that's true, because sometimes, as the person writing the book, you know everything.
Yeah,
It's all in
yeah.
your head. You
It's
know
all in
every
your head,
single thing.
yeah.
And then sometimes you say, why has this happened? And you're going, because of something else. And you said, I don't remember reading that bit.
Right,
and you go,
right.
oh God, did I forget to actually write it? You know, because in a process where you're editing and putting things in and taking things out, sometimes you actually forget that you haven't
put it in.
put something
it's
in.
up there, and you
Because it's up
believed
there.
that it was there. You believed it was
Yeah.
there. And speaking of quotes, I know you were quoted recently talking about what a professional writer is. What is a professional writer?
Professional writer is amateur who wouldn't quit. And I think,
An amateur who wouldn't
Yeah.
quit. And I also heard that you never did a writing course.
no, I didn't. I actually did go to a series of lectures about writing once, but
Yeah.
I never did one of these courses.
Yes,
where
yeah,
you're
yeah,
writing. But it just wasn't for me, you know. And I
Yeah.
think it's great for some people. It helps some people, but it wasn't the kind of thing
You were
that-
writing
that,
from the off,
that
though,
I
anyway.
wanted to do.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
were writing from the off. Now, I think you were 40 when you left banking.
Yes.
You were 36 when your first book came out, Dreaming of a Stranger.
You know my age is better than I do.
And you look 36. This is the extraordinary thing. But you were 36. Did you have an agent at that point?
I didn't for my first
For your first book?
3 books.
Okay.
And that was a mistake, actually. I should have. I would recommend that people get agents, because
Yeah.
although I'm quite a reasonable business person, there are things that every individual business has things that you do not know about.
Okay, and
You know,
it's good to have
and so-
someone who's expert in that
Yeah,
area.
somebody on your side.
Yeah.
You know.
But it's
and-
probably catch-22. It's probably difficult to get an agent before you have a success on your hands.
Not really.
it not?
No, I mean, it's difficult to, because if you're going to have a success, you've had to put something out there somewhere. Now it's maybe a little bit easier because there's self-publishing and,
Yes.
there's different ways of getting your work out which weren't there back in the 1990s.
Okay.
But at the same time, I think if anybody approaches you, if a publisher approaches you, then you can go to an agent and say, somebody has approached me, do you want to?
Or would you like to deal with that for me?
And people
Yeah.
say, oh, but I can make more money without an agent. I'm going to have to give them their 10% or 15% or whatever it
But
is.
that might be worth it.
But it is actually,
because they know all the tricks and
Yeah.
they know,
Yeah.
the pitfalls and all of that.
if you haven't published anything online, if somebody's not approaching you, but you want to go out and approach people, the agents know what publishers have gaps on their list, who might be looking for work.
Right.
Whereas you will just do a scattergun approach,
Okay.
or maybe waste your time approaching the wrong person and then be disappointed when you don't need to be,
And how do you get an agent? I think there'll be many people who watch this, and there are very few people that can achieve the success that you have. But even to attempt it, to if somebody wants to write and believes that they have ability, what would you recommend they do? How do they get published?
Write as an artist yearbook, which is now online, so you don't have to actually buy the book, although it's always a great read.
Yeah.
But they have a list of agents. They have a list of publishers and they lists of agents, and within the list of agents, they will highlight some of the writers that agent manages and looks after, and you can look at them and go, oh gosh, this agent has people who write books.
In this genre that I'm interested
yes.
in,
and a lot of people. I made a mistake when I first sent off my very first manuscript, and I mean I don't have a wall peppered with rejection slips, but I sent one off to a publisher who didn't publish the sort of stuff that I write, and I said, you might like to do this because Patricia Scanlon has been quite successful, and you might like to do this yourself. And they said, but we don't publish that stuff.
Okay.
And I went, oh gosh, okay. I'm thinking I was bringing them an opportunity to do something else. They're going, don't be ridiculous. We prefer sci-fi or whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Subsequently, they did actually move into women's fiction, but at that point they didn't. And actually, you're better off with some.
And they were sorry they said no to you.
Well, but you are better off with a publisher who has people in the genre because they know how to market it,
sure.
and they know what they're doing.
Sure.
With it,
And for the marketing, is it very draining, Sheila? I mean, your book is out; it's doing very well. But are you obliged and required to do a number of interviews or newspaper articles or festivals or going to?
Well, I mean, they do want you to, I suppose. Publicise it as much as you can, but nobody says to you, you must do a certain amount of interviews. And I suppose,
Do you do readings?
Very, very occasionally, because I really feel that the kind of book that I write is the kind of book that you want to read yourself, tucked up in a chair with maybe your bar of chocolate or your glass of wine or something like that. Because I write as a storyteller. That's my. I write as a storyteller. I like to think that my actual writing itself is well done, that the words flow, that it's all very nice, and it's both easy to read but enjoyable to read.
Yeah.
But it's not a literary work of art in the same way as somebody who wants to craft every word and come up with a new way of describing a tree or something like that.
Right.
And that's the sort of thing that people like to listen to being read. But storytelling, I feel that it's a much more immersive thing and you want to be into it yourself.
Yes.
So it's hard for me to pick out bits of my books to read because there's plot going on, and I'm going, okay, well, I don't read the middle of this story because this is telling you.
Do you have audiobooks as well?
Yes, I think the majority of my books are on audio as well. They're all
audiobooks as well. Okay, we're up to Suddenly Single. In fact, actually, before we get to the banking, I wanted to ask you about Suddenly Single. I think somebody wrote to you. Somebody wrote to you, and I'm sure you get letters from people from all over the world, but somebody wrote to you, and what they said to you had great meaning for you. What was that?
From Suddenly Single, it was a guy who wrote to me, and of course people often say, oh, your only readers are women, and it's not true. I have quite a nice male following as well.
Yes,
This guy wrote and he said, I read your book Suddenly Single, and now I know why my girlfriend left me. God. And I thought, oh dear. And now you could probably have a conversation back because they would contact you on Twitter or Facebook or something like that. But I just thought it was very interesting,
didn't it?
I did think it was interesting that somebody read my book and thought, oh, my actions were like this and like this guy, and now I see what my girlfriend was thinking.
And that was probably very helpful for him.
Well, I'd like to think so, but possibly not.
He might have preferred a happier ending.
Yeah.
Tell me about, speaking of male readers, you also had a letter from, I think, a Russian prisoner, and you've always remembered this letter.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was probably the most emotional letter I ever got, and the most emotional I got after receiving a letter from somebody. And it was sent to me by the woman who was his visitor, and this guy's in a Russian prison, and he was there for quite a serious assault crime. And while he was there, he had some English and he was learning English, and somebody gave him a copy of one of my books, which escapes me at the moment. I think it was My Favourite Goodbye, maybe, in English.
Yes.
And he read it, and No, it wasn't my favourite goodbye. It was a different book.
The word escape wasn't in it, was it?
No, it
The
wasn't.
Great Escape.
It was someone special. Yeah. But
You've so many. It's hard to remember
I
them all.
remember them from the names of the characters. You see, that's my problem.
Really?
But he said, you know, he read the book and he said it was, you know, it wasn't that it was easy to read, but he could follow the story
Yeah.
very well in English. And it was like a lot of my stories do have quite a family background and family influence.
Yeah.
And he said that reading it made him want to be a better dad for his children. And like he was due out of prison in 2 years, and he wanted to be out and be a good dad for his boy. And he realised how important dads were as well as mums were for the children.
Wonderful.
Oh gosh, I was in floods of tears for
because
days.
I'm nearly crying
Every
now
day,
listening to
myself
this.
too, because every time I think about it, and you know,
But you've inspired somebody like that as well. And
well, you know, it
because
was.
you're there with your thoughts when you're incarcerated. You're there all day long, and you do think about relationships. You do think about the things that are important, the things that you've lost.
Yeah.
And sometimes the only thing they can do is read, which is
Yeah.
why reading is very important for
Yeah.
prisoners. But also they can, if people read, they can then express themselves. So he was able to write you.
Yeah, and it was a
that letter.
beautiful letter. It was a really long letter, and it was, you know, saying that he was sorry for the things he'd done and for how he'd fallen into, as he said, bad ways. And you know, it was just really, really moving, really emotional. And for me, it's the power of words. You know,
the
it
power
really, really
of words,
is.
power of words, to entertain, to keep somebody who's lonely occupied, and to, you know, you're talking about immersing yourself in this
I think
world,
that's a really good
which is
point actually
wonderful.
about books. And again, I get letters from people who do live alone, and they say, well, you know, I can't get out much, but when I'm reading, you know, I am out. I am somewhere else. I'm in a different place, and I just think that's so important.
I spoke to Nell McCafferty recently.
Oh gosh, Nell.
And she was just, as usual, extraordinary.
Yeah.
We visited her in her home, and it was she's a marvellous person, as you know. We all loved and still do love Nell. And but I just asked her at the end, how was she? And she said, bleak. She said, because I can't read anymore because of my eyesight.
Yeah.
So this is a woman that just devoured words all the time, was writing and was reading all the time. So I'm going to try and find out. I'm sure there are ways of being able to read a newspaper with some kind of technology.
Yeah,
I think that's what she misses.
My mum has macular degeneration, and she can no longer read with any great ease. I mean, she can read, but very, very slowly.
Yeah.
And she says that's the biggest thing for her as well, as
huge
not being able
loss.
to read. Yeah.
We're going to talk about because we have to talk about. You're such a gentle, lovely, humble person, and yet you were a tigress in the corporate world. Because
no, I was
were
not a tigress. I totally was not a tigress.
You were such a high achiever. Will you tell us about your journey from the central bank up to the time you left at the age of 40, when you were trading corporate bonds?
Yeah, well, I mean, the central bank, as I said, I started off in recruitment section, you know, so it was nothing to do with banking. But then I did want to get involved in the banking side, and so I moved into the banking division, and then from there I got a job offer from one of the client banks that I used to deal with, which was ABN AMRO Bank, and I moved there and moved to their credit department, and then I got moved there into the dealing room, because I think they just said, that girl is just, she's too much of a talker, and she's too much of a going out wanting to do things differently, and maybe this is a better place for her. And
were you showing a lot of initiative?
I kept asking why we were doing things the way we were doing them.
Really?
Yeah. I kept thinking there's other ways to do things. And the dealing, I had no idea. I had no clue of what this was all about. And I went in there and we were basically trading currencies, you know, buying and selling foreign exchange, both on the bank's behalf and on behalf of our clients.
Yeah.
And I got it. I understood it. It made sense to me, you know. And then there was obviously more to that, you know, that's one part of it. Then there's government bonds, you know, where governments are raising money, and how are
Right.
they raising money? They're doing that in loans, and then you can trade those too. Then corporate bonds, companies want to raise money, and there's different ways of doing that. You can sell shares, but you can also sell, you know, debt in the company in form of corporate bonds. And so all those things, I just thought it gave you a real insight into how other things manage in the world. You know, other things happen in the world. A side of business that I wasn't
because
really
the
interested in initially.
creative mind isn't normally associated with very business-like mind.
Yeah.
But you really have both in spades, haven't you?
I like a certain order and logic as well. I mean, I like being creative and breaking those logical thoughts, but I do like things that happen for a logical reason, which is maybe, you know, when the plotting of the book comes in.
Yeah.
But I think partly, you know, in the trading rooms and all that, there are very few women.
Yes.
And so when I got in there, I was kind of thinking, why is this? And I realised that it's partly because it's so aggressive, and partly just because women. I remember one guy saying to me, you know, women are not good traders. You wouldn't be good in this because, you know, something would go wrong and you'd cry.
God.
I went, no, I wouldn't cry. What are you talking about? You know, said I might make you cry, but I'm certainly not going to cry myself.
Was there a lot of that sort of undermining and?
There was a lot of it, and there was, you know, there were things that certainly would not be acceptable in today's business world.
Yeah.
You know, but it was thought of as perfectly normal then. It was perfectly normal for people to bring in, you know, top shelf magazines and things like that, and pass them around and have them on the desk. And so you're working, and there's a magazine beside you.
And there was no anti-bullying policy in place in these.
Well, that wouldn't have been seen as bullying for starters. And
no,
there was no anti-bullying. There was none of that in place.
But you probably had to, you know, stand on your own 2 feet and.
Well, I think that comes back.
Not only deal with them, but you actually became their boss to a large extent.
You know, I think it comes back to my dad saying, you can do whatever you want to do or be whatever you want to be, because it never occurred to me that any of the things that were said to me or done to me or whatever was because I was female. It was just because that was the way. I always felt with guys at work, the one thing you knew was in that environment was they all wanted to stab you in the back. But it wasn't just me, it was everybody else.
Yes.
You know, they were stabbing everybody in the back.
Yes, so at least it was a level playing field, yes.
So you were looking for whatever was your weak point, and the weak point in being a female was that you were a female.
Right,
you know?
okay.
The weak point in somebody else, some of the guys were other things.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
So that was all it was. I mean, certainly there are things that, you know, you would do differently now and say differently, you'd call out things differently
you'd call
now.
out,
But even when I was leaving, those things were changing. So that was good.
And they have changed,
But
I think, to a great degree now.
like, I really do feel that women do have to be very strong, and they have to be strong in themselves. And oftentimes we're not brought up to be strong in ourselves enough.
We're not good at blowing our trumpet. And if we do blow our trumpet, we're considered uppity. And I do think, and this isn't an anti-man rant at all, we have a lovely man here, my husband, who's recording this.
Walking away now.
Wonderfully, like your husband, he works with me too. But a man will always have the confidence to go up to somebody and say, I did that was my idea, isn't it wonderful? A woman, in most cases, tends to go home and hope that somebody paid attention to the work that they did.
Well, that's it. And when I was working in one of the banking organisations I was in, we had 2 people who joined us more or less at the same time. And after a couple of weeks, I was talking to them and asking them about their experience and how they were doing, and, you know, on a very calming, caring way. And so I said to the guy, you know, how are you getting on? How are things? And he said, no, it's good. I'm really enjoying this. And I said, and how, you know, now that you're here for a while, is there anything that you're particularly working towards? And he said, oh, I want Mick's job. So Mick was quite a senior guy, and I went, okay. And I was
very honest.
I was talking to the woman who was 1,000 times more qualified than this guy, I have to say, in terms of academic qualifications. Very, very qualified, and she was very, very smart. And I said to her, asked her the same question. I said, where do you want to go? And she said, well, you know, I really want to make sure that I do this job very well, and people recognise that I do it well.
Yes.
And she hadn't kind of sat there on day one and gone, oh yeah, that's the job I want. She was I need to do this well, and I need people to realise I can do this well. Whereas the guys are just, doesn't matter, I can do it well or not, I still want his job.
And quite brazen about it.
Absolutely brazen about it, and you would often find that, and it's absolutely a confidence thing. Guys are just more confident to go after something.
The amount of women that leave the workplace for a while, maybe they're bringing up children, taking time out, and they're anxious then getting back into the workplace because of the gap in their CV, not realising that it's a great thing to be able to say, I took 5 years out, I was rearing my children, I picked up some further skills while I was out, and I'm here ready to bring all of my skills to bear now. There's not enough of that happening. Now, we're talking about, I needed to ask you, were you ever tempted to write a book about the banking scandal?
About the banking scandal, the crash, you mean?
With the crash. Okay, we'll change the word.
The crash, yeah, not really, because, well, you know, I would be quite happy to write, it would be a factual book.
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
And quite a lot of people jumped in and did
well, no,
all
no,
that,
I mean
you
a
know,
fictional
so,
kind of, you know, but
not about
based on
not about
experience.
the crash itself or the banking scandals themselves. I mean, I think the fallout of that has come into some of my books in terms of things that have happened to characters and places that they find
and
themselves as a result of those things.
Yeah.
I mean, I know in my very first book, I did set a lot of that in banking world, and in that book, there's one of the guys, the main husband in that, and he has an affair, and it's the, you know, not all of my male characters had affairs. There was quite a big gap between that book and this book.
Yeah.
But interestingly, when we were talking about it, because I was still working in banking at the time, I was in finance at the time, and one of the guys said to me, "You based him on me, didn't you?" I'm kind of going, "Oh my God, this guy's horrible."
First, the arrogance of him thinking that you'd be writing about him.
Then I was kind of thinking,
the words of Carly Simon, "You're so vain," comes to mind.
I was thinking, are you having an affair then? You know, because I didn't realise that.
Oh dear, of course.
Yeah. So then I felt really terrible. The next time I met his wife, I was just kind of going, "Oh my God."
Do people think that? Do people say to you, "Was this about me? Is that character based on..."
People always think that characters are based on real life.
Yes.
They always do. And I remember being at an interview once, and Kathy Kelly was with me, and somebody said to her, "Oh, Kathy, I know that character, whoever it was in your book, I know who that is." And Kathy's going, "Oh my God, it's nobody." She said, "No, you know, and I know who it is."
Yeah.
Kathy's going, "I really don't." She kept saying to me, "I made her up. Who is she?" You know, so
people forget, you know,
find, and that's the thing, they find something in a character that they think is real. And that's so good.
That is great.
That's
great because, and you know, do you know what I love? I love when I finish reading a book, I love feeling disappointed that it's over.
Yeah.
Because I want it, like the way you were told by your mother, what happens next?
Yeah.
I want to know what happened next. Well, that's a sign of a great book, I think. And I finally wanted to ask you, because we were talking about the banking world and the very honest approach of some of those people that you're working with, saying that I want such a person's job and all of that. But there seems to be, and I think it is really genuine, I don't think it's a question of seeming at all, a real collegiality between all of the writers in this country, and great support for each other. And would you count as some of your close friends, some of the writers that are household names here?
Yeah, well, Patricia Scanlon just lives up the road from me, so we have coffee quite a lot, and she's a good friend. Kathy, Marion, Claudia Carroll, who's coming to the festival.
Yes.
You know, I rang her, I said, "Claudia, can you come?" She said, "Of course I'll come." Yeah, we are all close, and we would try and support each other as much as possible, because, you know, it's a hard world as well. I mean, I don't mean it's a hard, it's not a difficult word, but you're on your own a lot.
Yes, you're isolated. You're writing. It's solitary, isn't it?
So you are on your own. So it's not like you have a whole corporation behind you. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so it is nice to be able to meet people and say, "Oh, like it's tricky at the moment, you know."
And they know exactly what you're going through,
what
and
you
they
mean.
know,
Absolutely.
if you're having a tough day or whatever. Now you also, I think I read somewhere that you're an award-winning badminton player.
Well, I have won some things, yes. It's a while since I won
You still,
anything.
you still play.
I
You're
still
very
play,
fit
yeah,
looking,
I do play because I've played for years, but I particularly now when, you know, most of the time I'm sitting down, I think it's important to have something that's actually not sitting down.
Yes, they say there's been reports recently that if you're sedentary,
Yeah.
and even if you're doing your 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week, that it's not enough. You need to be doing more, so you're very active.
Well, I think that the thing about the badminton as well is that, you know, I never thought I was a competitive person. Okay, you know, I like to do well at what I'm doing. If I'm doing something, I want to do it well.
Yes, yeah.
But badminton allows you to be actually completely competitive because you have to win, you know. Like in the book world, you want to do well. There will always be people doing better than you. There will always be people selling more than you. There will be always people who write much, much better books than you do, you know. There will always be somebody. In the badminton court, at that point, winner, loser,
Yeah,
that's it.
two people.
That's it.
And you and Colin will play together too?
We never play together because it's not good for our relationship. Because if you're playing with a partner who is not related to you, you can have, you know...
He's good too, though. He's good, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't play as much as he used to, but he's still playing competitively, yeah. But with your partner, you'll just shout at them, you know. If you're playing with somebody else, you're a bit politer about why did you do that.
And you might feel that you have to let him win, and then that might rankle
things,
later on, you know. You might be, why did I do that?
I still remember the game that I beat him at, and he has, so does he.
You've never let him forget it. So you've written 24 books. Are you thinking about number 25? Is it in the works at the moment, or are you going to take a break?
No, it is in process at the moment. After every couple of books, I think, will I take a break or will I not take a break? And if I still have an idea, if there's something that's still nagging at me that I want to write, I'll write it. You know. So I think the break happens at the point where I say to myself, I absolutely don't want to do this anymore. Of course, you know, there are times that you think to yourself, writing is hard work because, you know, you're sitting down at the computer, physically writing. That is hard work. That part is the hard work.
Yes.
But the creativity part of it and the thinking of the characters and the situations and the plots, that's a joy.
Absolutely.
You know.
And it's exciting seeing where they're going and how they're developing.
Yeah, and developing the storyline and
And
my thing actually is family trees for my character. I do a family tree.
Yes,
So I know everything about, you know, their parents and their parents' parents, you know, so I have a good idea about that. So that's my actual main structure. And when I look at that, I then kind of have an idea of how the timeline of my character's life is. So I kind of make notes on that. And then after that, then I just start writing it.
There's been so much thoughtfulness put into this whole thing anyway. So then it comes kind of
then it comes and then it starts. And so the very start of it is not bad because I have this idea coming out, and then as you move on a little bit, you say, okay, this is not working the way I want it to work. This isn't going, and then it becomes a little bit more where you have to think about it more and think a bit more deeply about the character and how you're going to actually. I suppose your job as a writer is having an idea, but turning that idea into something that people are interested in and want to read about. So that's the job.
And on another level, so many books now are turned into, and with Netflix and the huge success that Netflix is and all these dramas. Are there prospects of any of your books being turned into?
Well, you know, it always kind of
TV
gets to a certain point. I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but you know, for me, the important part is having the book and people reading the book. If that happens, if one of the things that eventually does come to pass actually comes to pass, that's great. But it's not something that keeps me awake at night.
But I'm amazed that it hasn't happened so far.
Well, maybe it will.
I'm sure
maybe
it will. And maybe you'd write a part in for me.
Of course.
A former TV presenter.
I have TV presenters in one of my books.
Who's now a criminal barrister and does lots of other things. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm really excited about the thought of the Donaghmede inaugural literary festival, 26th to the 28th of September. It sounds absolutely wonderful. Almost as much as a pleasure that it has been for me today to meet you finally, Sheila. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great talking to you. Thanks.